Hi, I'm DJ Ware. On this episode of the Cyber Gizmo, I'm going to be taking another look, at Fuchsia OS, but this time a very unique distro that actually brings in Fuchsia OS, takes part of it, and creates a Linux distribution, and this is called DaliaOS. So stay tuned right after this. So, I'm going to take an initial look at DaliaOS. So, and I'm sure, just like what happened with NixOS, as soon as I put this out here, they'll release a update to it. But anyway, this version goes back to February 22nd, 2022. So that's what I'm basing this initial look at. I'm not going to call it a review. It would not be fair to review this OS, but it is very unique. And as you can see, that is not XFCE, and it's certainly not Cinnamon, and it's not any of the other desktop environments that we're normally familiar with. This is Pangolin, and Pangolin is a Flutter application. It is based on Flutter, written in Dart. And that's what we're going to be looking at today, is this distribution that surrounds all this and how it kind of works and why it's put together. So the first thing is the first kind of unique feature of DaliaOS is that it runs multiple kernels. It does run a microkernel from Fuchsia called Zircon, and if you look in the Linux, I'll put my links back in here for Fuchsia OS. Zircon is the kernel for Fuchsia OS, which is a Google operating system that they are working on as a possible replacement for Android and Chrome OS. And I say possible because I still have not seen where Google has officially announced that they are replacing Android and Chrome OS with Fuchsia OS. I have seen that Samsung is going ahead with plans to build their next generation phone technologies around Fuchsia OS. But so far, I have not seen anything official. Now, if you have, leave me a comment below and let me know. I could have missed it. It's possible. Anyway. But not only does Dahlia run the Zircon microkernel, it also runs a standard Linux kernel based on 5.17, and this is a release candidate because of the time at which this release was put together. 5.17 was still in release candidate status. I would say DaliaOS is an alpha release or an early preview release, it's not finished by any stretch of the imagination. It is not done. But I think what this is really meant to do is to provide a means for people to do development, to do some debugging, and maybe get an early look at the system and see whether or not this is a direction they want to go in or not. So, definitely you can't use this as your daily driver, I'm afraid. But I'm covering this because it is so unique. Dahlia comes with a desktop environment, as I mentioned, called Pangolin, and that can run on Fuchsia OS because it is a Flutter application. Linux can also run Flutter applications with some modification, and Dahlia has put those modifications in to allow it to happen. So Pangolin is a shell user interface. It can run either on the Zircon kernel or on the Linux kernel, and it supports either x86 64-bit, so that means it will run Intel and ARM CPUs, ARM and AMD CPUs, but it also will run ARM. Now, the ARM processors that they support right now are the Raspberry Pi 3 and 4. So I guess the first thing we should talk about is what the heck is a Flutter app? Flutter applications is the UI. That's the application user UI UX that you would be using to do things like run a browser, bring up your file system, be able to add packages, or be able to even have a calculator, or maybe do some desktop video or whatever. But Flutter applications not only run on DaliaOS, but you can also take those applications and run them on Fuchsia. So DaliaOS can serve as the development platform for building Flutter apps as well. And there are instructions on their site on how to set up the build environment for you to be able to do that. So one of the technologies that underlies Dahlia is Graft. Graft is kind of a unique package. It allows the creation, management, and execution of virtual machines and containers. And it also does an isolation environment based on what they say is Chroot. I don't know if that's the Linux Chroot or whether that's a different version of the Chroot system, but it also has the Chroot manager and an integrator to allow you to integrate applications into the system. So the idea behind it is that Dahlia can run applications from standard Linux distros like Ubuntu or Fedora, Debian, but it also can run other VM distributions, other VMs from Microsoft Windows or even Mac OS. So that gives you a pretty wide range of application support that you would have in it. Graft serves as the core part of DaliaOS and the experience. So that allows you to use apps that aren't built for DaliaOS or even Linux itself. So, but Graft is incomplete at this time on Dahlia. The other thing that's missing from Dahlia is an installer. So if you're bringing this up, you'll be running off of your CD-ROM or ISO in order to execute and look at the environment. So there's no way to actually copy it onto an SSD or an NVMe drive. So it is definitely meant as a preview or development work environment and do some preliminary testing, maybe some debugging or evaluation. But it looks a little bit like this, and the what you see here is Pangola's view of the applications. But and I'll show you a little bit later on. There's another view that you can do this when we get into looking at it. So the architecture of it, you might think, oh, this sounds really complicated, but it's not. It really isn't. So you have your Pangolin user shell is supporting the application base that you're going to be running. And those applications can be Flutter apps or they can be standard Linux apps. And so you have the Xorg X11 environment on the left below Pangolin. Also, you have the Flutter environment on the below Pangolin as well. Then you have your base user space. Now, they say Linux kernel 5.10. Actually, that would, in this case, now it's Linux kernel 5.17. And then you have your bootloader under it. So, and then you have some system agents. So is this an agent-based operating system? It does have elements of agent architecture in it. So that is used for the system, that is used as system agents to communicate events from one part of the system to another. Because this is a microkernel architecture, so you will have part of the kernel in the system space, and you'll have part of the kernel in the user space. So then you have your LXC, which is your containers. It does not do Dockers, it does LXC. You also have QEMU for your virtualization, and then FIMAGE or FImage, which is your Fuchsia-based applications over on that side. Then Chroot, which is, it says standard Linux system, so I'm thinking that's probably a standard Linux Chroot. I hope that's not the case because that would really be unfortunate. There's better ways of doing Chroot today than the old the old Linux way of doing it. But yeah, then you have the Recovery as OS over on the right-hand side. And one thing that this does not show is where, I guess it would be where you have the Fuchsia components here on the FI image. So, yeah. Package-wise, DaliaOS uses RPM, standard packages from the Linux side of the house. And there's also a Dart-based application manager called DAP. That's your client-side application. There's also a window, an application manager that runs in the window, the GUI environment, that interfaces, I guess, into DAP. That allows you to install Flutter applications. So DaliaOS is meant to manage applications in isolation from one another. That's getting to be pretty common pursuit in most of the distributions today. All the major ones, they're all pursuing something along that line. So yeah, and DaliaOS leverages the modern portions of Fuchsia and the standard features of Linux. So I mean, my take on that is, if you look at what Fuchsia OS is really designed to do, it's designed to remove Linux from Google's operating system architecture for their tablets, their phones, and their Chromebooks. So yeah, they're going to get rid of it. And if they do go this way, and again, they haven't officially said that, at least I haven't read it. But if they do that, then Linux, as far as that part of the user base, is gone. So at least over time, it'll be gone. System requirements, it takes a 64-bit. It can be AMD or Intel-based CPU. 1 gigahertz or higher. It does support UEFI and legacy BIOS bootloaders. 512 megabytes of RAM is all you need. 512 megabytes of storage is all you need. Now the storage here is the storage for the USB stick or the SD card that you're using to actually execute this environment from. It will, because it does not have an installer, so it can't copy off onto something else. So you have Intel GMA 4500 or better, Intel HD 400 or 4000 or better, and it does support NVIDIA, although they recommend the Intel HD environment. From what I can see on the virtual machine, it seems to be pretty quick, at least in being responsive. And I'll show you how quick it is. So there's also some requirements if you're running on a virtual machine. Of course, no internal storage disk is needed because there's no installer. Now, I put this on Proxmox. I did not have to do that QEMU system enable KVM. And it could be that the legacy environment is already set. So, yeah. Also, Raspberry Pi 3 or 4, you'll need, of course, a Broadcom BCM 2837 or higher, 256 megabytes of RAM, and 512 megabytes of storage. 1 gig's recommended. And in this case, that's going to be your SD card, of course, or if you're using a USB stick or maybe an SD as well. So I guess the first thing we need to do is to get in here and boot this thing up and take a look at it. There has to be some communication going back and forth. Yeah, so it has defaulted back. So I'll go ahead and do this again. There we go. We got that. So there is a terminal program, obviously, but let's go back into here. So you have this view of the application base. You'll notice that all those extra ones are gone now. So yeah, it doesn't persist because there's no way to store it. But then there's these categories that you have here, and some of them will be blank. And then my system ones too. But there's a different way if you can look at this way, which is kind of a more conventional view of your applications. So, but the only thing you're giving up here is you are giving up your categorization here if you do that. So if that doesn't bother you, I guess that's fine. So let's take a look. I guess the first thing we probably should look at is settings in here. So again, it set everything back to default. So this would be exactly how you would see DaliaOS when you booted it up after you created a ISO image from a download. So now none of this actually works. I mean, I can turn it off, but I can't go in and do anything to it. I can't, yeah. I can't really do anything to it. Same here. I can turn things on, but I can't configure it. I can do this. I can change my customization. These are my accent colors, and you can see they're changing over here on the left-hand side. So I just get something that looks fairly decent, and of course it's going to clash. And let's see, is this going to get me back? No. Okay. So yeah. So there's that. And then we'll have display. Nothing in there. Nothing in sound, nothing in locale, nothing in notifications, nothing in applications yet. Developer mode, I can turn on or off, and then I have a little bit of information that it gives me about the environment. So yeah, you'll notice that updates are disabled. I can't update, so the only way I can handle any changes to this is to download a new release from them. So yep. As far as the other things that you have available, I mean, you have a calculator. We can bring up some of them, I guess. A clock. Now, one thing, yeah, it won't snap. So I don't know what their plans are for the UI, but I guess time will tell, right? Time will tell. This is Graft. This is how it looks now, and this time you can see. This is saying clearly that's a virtual machine. Nothing else actually does anything, apparently. Yeah, it's all eye candy, but it doesn't actually do anything. Fuchsia can be here as well. Now, there are instructions on the site if you want to do Fuchsia Flutter development. You can do that. So, all right. So yeah, not much in there. Files. I can create a folder. But none of these things do anything except for this one, which allows me to create another folder. I can traverse around a bit. Doesn't really go. It's just resorting. So let's see what else we got here. I got the terminal window, which you saw that. This part works where I can have multiple tabs set up, but again, I can't change any of the settings for the terminal. And then you have the first time I ran this. This is the Web App Manager. These are Flutter apps, so I can. First time I did this, I pressed the install and nothing happened. It wasn't. So it does. It actually is installing all these, and I just want you to see how quick this went. So, Discord, Google, Townscraper, Visual Studio, DaliaOS documentation, and then Minecraft Classic. They're all there, but they disappear as soon as I reboot, as you saw earlier. Then there's a Task Manager, which again doesn't do anything. Resources blank, containers are blank because of course I haven't created any yet. Then there on the command line you do have HTOP. It's showing 361 meg in use. So yeah, 30 tasks, 61 threads. I mean, in comparison to what again Linux is doing, it's a heck of a lot lighter weight. And then NeoFetch 1440, 990, and this is saying 364. Okay. This is not telling me the number of packages that are installed, but that's okay. It doesn't have a package manager to work from, so let's see. I showed you that. Let's see what else we got. I got the web browser. I guess we should bring that up. So you'll notice that this is a Flutter app here. So I can restart it from, now this is communicating with Pangolin, and then this is a Flutter launch here that's coming up. So this is quite responsive. Let me go and we'll go ahead and do that. And then I'll go to my channel since I don't want to be in trouble with somebody else. And we have an ad. Sorry about that. Okay, let's see how we're doing here. So let me snap this up, and usually you would get a drop frame, but no. That's not bad. That's really good. I don't have a 4K video to bring up, but It does respond to the escape key. Let's go ahead and stop that. So as far as a look and feel, I don't think I can, if there's anything else I can show you other than, yeah, I could bring up, there's Google's. I think that's their browser. Again, this is also a Flutter app. So, I mean, as far as, you are running this, it's not an emulator. Since the kernel is resident, since the Zircon kernel is resident, this is not an emulator. So I wonder if, well, we'll get into that. So I'm gonna leave this here just like it was, just like that, and I'm gonna go back and let's talk about some of the final thoughts here about what I think is possibly going on here. So, what is DaliaOS? I would call it a hybrid operating system. It's hybrid from the standpoint is it's multiple OSs. It has a duality, so split brain OS, but it does have a microkernel in the form of Zircon, and it does have the Linux kernel, which of course is a that's all in one. So what could this mean for Linux? Would this make it easier to run Windows applications on Linux? I think it would. Because of the architecture that they have adopted, and certainly it will make it easy to run Flutter applications on Linux. It also will make it easier to develop them. So is this something that could, I guess these are my questions, is this an operating system that could potentially transform Linux? I don't think so. We're too set in our ways. I think it will take the proverbial 2x4 to the nose before the Linux people wake up and go, oh, we're behind the times here. The only people that care about the desktop environment are the people that are building desktop environments and the people that use them. As far as the people on top that are in the working on the kernel, the only thing they care about is what's going on in cloud, where the money is. So yeah, or AI, they don't care about what we're doing. So would this be something that would spark a new innovation in Linux? I think so. I mean, it's always been a user-driven community, right? So you have the Linux group that's control of the kernel, but all of a sudden this introduces Google as a potential control for the kernel. Now, Zircon I believe that is open source, and I think that is open source. We can check on that, but I do believe it is. But this could be the kind of thing. I don't know if it'll be DaliaOS that does it. I hope you enjoyed this. Look, it's a very early look at DaliaOS. I hope that the development team keeps working on this because I can't wait to see what they come up with. I always like new things that are doing crazy ideas because if people aren't saying that you're crazy or it's the guys that are in the bleeding edge that people are looking at going, why the hell are you doing that? That is stupid. You're wasting your time. Then you know for sure that you're doing the right kinds of things because if they think you're crazy, yeah, perfect. Be crazy. That's how change happens. It will happen suddenly. It's always been true. If you hit something coming completely out of